You deal with conflict in a healthy, mutually beneficial, God-sanctioned way. Now, in today's passage, Solomon and his wife that we've seen for 2 weeks, the love side, this morning, we're going to see a little bit of the conflict side. And there's not a question whether or not they love one another. But I want you to notice how they attempt to deal with their conflict. And the conflict is really minor. They're on different schedules. My wife and I are on different schedules today. We drove to church in separate vehicles because we're on different schedules. Sometimes we're on different schedules at the end of the day. I'm ready to eat and she's not ready to eat, or vice versa. The groom speaks first from Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verse 1. I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I have drunk my wine and my milk. And then the choir sings, celebrating the love of Solomon and his wife. Eat, O friends, and drink. Drink your fill, O lovers. You know, that's just like the choir represents sort of your friends and family and neighbors. They think you have a perfect marriage, and they're just saying, we're so happy as you celebrate your anniversary, and you are the ideal couple, and they write all of those nice things. But there is an issue here. Solomon is standing at his wife's bedroom door. And you would think, based on the previous 2 sermons, that she's ready to say, just a minute. I'll be right there. But look at verse 2. I slept, but my heart was awake. Listen, my lover is knocking. And then she sort of goes back, recalls some memories. Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my flawless one. My head is drenched with dew, my hair with the dampness of the night. She knows that he loves her, but this is such an inconvenient time. She is in bed with her hair rollers on and her makeup off. Verse 3, she says, I have taken off my robe. Must I put it on again? I have washed my feet. Must I soil them again? She's really saying, do I want to go to the trouble of making my spouse happy? And while she's debating the issue, the action continues. My lover thrust his hand through the latch opening. My heart began to pound for him. I arose to open for my lover, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with flowing myrrh. In other words, she grabs the perfume bottle and she sprays herself just a little bit. My fingers with flowing myrrh dripping on the handles of the lock. And finally, that's my word, finally, I opened for my lover. But my lover had left. He was gone. My heart sank at his departure. I looked for him but did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer. Hey, honey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Hey, let's back up 5 minutes, okay? Let's take it all back. Let's start. You come in the door. You see, it happens to every couple. It happens in every relationship. You know that we're not talking just about marriage. But this is absolutely the saddest passage in the Bible in terms of living people. Now, the only one that is sadder is where Jesus says, "Depart from me, those that I don't know." But this is two people who love one another. But their worlds are going in different directions simply because their lives are on different schedules. Married folks, get your life on the same schedule as your spouse. Make time for one another. Have dinner together. At least sit down and have a cup of coffee. For the last 4 days, even though it was our anniversary, Darlie and I have been caught up dog sitting for our son. And my recommendation is you never try to dog sit 4 dogs because it turns out to be, a real circus. So we were going and coming and we were not able to be together. Until last night, you remember the swing from last week's video. We went out and sat down in the swing with no dogs, but a cup of coffee. And it was only about 10 minutes. But it was 10 minutes of being together for one another. And we have to adjust our schedules so that we make sure that we have time for our spouse. Now, when it comes to dealing with conflict, whose place is it to acknowledge that there is a conflict? Whose place is it to give in? And should the wife always do things that make her husband happy? Listen again, as Solomon's wife deals with this conflict, not talking to him, but the conflict in her own heart, and resolves it, but too late, she says, "My heart sank. I looked for him, but he was gone. I called. He didn't answer because it was too late." How do you keep it from being too late? Number one, you identify the conflict. And I've sat with couples in counseling who've said to me, "Preacher, I don't know what's wrong." Now, you're either a liar or you're just plain dumb. Because if there's a conflict in your marriage, you do know what it is. You may not be dealing with it, you may not be acknowledging it, but there is a conflict, and both parties know when there's a conflict going on. And if you don't really understand the conflict, just sit your spouse down and say, "Okay, now, as best you can, tell me what the problem is." And what you're going to do is you're going to write down the conflict. That's the first step to resolving it. Write it down. Put it in words that you can actually read. It's amazing how many times I edit a sermon. I read it, the staff reads it, my secretary proofs it, I'm still reading it, and it keeps going through changes and doesn't get finalized until Wednesday or Thursday. Because I want to make sure that the words are exactly what I think God is wanting me to say. And so by writing it down, I'm able to see the flow. After you write down your take on your conflict, then exchange papers with your spouse and read it from his or her perspective. It's amazing. It's like reading the 4 Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They all tell the same story, but they don't tell it alike. And husbands and wives will not describe their conflict in the same way. So you give it to your spouse, and, when you exchange those papers, you're going to see their view of the conflict. And that may help you to be able to talk about it then. You may be able to resolve it. But if not, you go to a third party and you get their advice. This can be Dr. Price or one of the counselors at the summit. This can be one of the staff. This probably should not be your best friend, but this can be from a devout Christian. But find someone that you think can be neutral and share maybe both papers with them and say, what do you advise? Now, why is it so important to get the other side of the argument? God created us, and He created us to survive. He created us to be free to make our own decisions. That's the only way we can be saved. But when it comes to dealing with conflicts between us and other people, God knew that this very gift would not be viewed as an asset, but a hindrance. So in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 19, verse 15, he said, one witness is not enough to convict a man. A matter must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses.